So, you're comfortable. Maybe you've got something warm nearby. Good. Because we're about to spend the next few hours deep inside one of the most meticulously constructed, obsessively layered, quietly unsettling pieces of animated storytelling that has ever existed. We're talking about Gravity Falls, and more specifically, we're going to go through 125 of its unsolved mysteries, its hidden questions, its dangling threads, and its genuinely strange details that nobody ever quite got a satisfying answer to. This isn't a quick list. We're not rushing. Every mystery deserves its full context, its full weight, the full strange texture of what makes it feel so persistent in the minds of people who watched this show years ago and still find themselves thinking about it at odd hours. So settle in, because this one goes deep. Part 1. The show that was already telling you. Everything Gravity Falls first aired on June 15th, 2012. That date matters more than you'd think, and we'll come back to it. The premise sounds simple. 12-year-old twins Dipper and Mabel Pines get shipped off to spend the summer with their great-uncle Stanley in a small town called Gravity Falls, Oregon. Stan runs a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack. There are pine trees, forest roads, a paranoid handyman, a teenage cashier, and somewhere in those woods, buried under a fake tree stump, a mysterious journal filled with drawings of monsters. That's the surface. That's what the first episode gives you. But Alex Hirsch, the creator, writer, and voice of half the cast, wasn't making a surface-level show. He was building something much stranger, much more patient, and much more layered than it appeared. From the very first frame of the very first episode, he was already leaving clues, already hiding things in the corners of the screen, already encoding messages into the audio that most people would never notice. And here, right at the beginning of this list, is the question that sets the tone for everything else. Mystery 1. What do the opening credits ciphers actually tell us? And why has no one fully decoded every single one? Every episode of Gravity Falls ends with a short cryptogram, a few encoded letters flashing on screen just before the credits roll. For the first season, these are encoded with a Caesar cipher, which means each letter is shifted back 3 positions in the alphabet. The reversed whisper at the end of the theme song even tells you how to crack it, 3 letters back. The very first message, the one that appears at the end of the very first episode, reads, once decoded, Stan is not what he seems. Let that sit for a moment. In June of 2012, before anyone knew anything about Stan's hidden identity, before anyone knew about the portal in the basement, before anyone knew that the man calling himself Stan Pines had been living under a stolen name for 30 years, the show was already telling you, hiding it in a 3-second flash of scrambled letters at the end of a children's cartoon. Trusting that someone, somewhere, would pause it, copy it down, work through the alphabet, and find the message. And someone did. They always did. The cipher system evolves throughout the series. Around episode 7, it switches to an @bash cipher, where the alphabet is simply reversed. A becomes Z, B becomes Y, and so on. The whisper changes accordingly. Switch A with Z. Around episode 14, the show moves to an A1Z26 cipher, where each letter becomes its number. A is 1, B is 2, all the way to Z is 26. The whisper updates. 26 letters. Then, in Season 2, the whole system upgrades to a Visionaire cipher, a far more complex code that requires a keyword to crack. The keyword is hidden in the reversed whisper of the theme. Key, Visionaire. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The messages hidden in these end credits cryptograms are not just flavor. Some of them are direct foreshadowing, some hint at character betrayals, some reference events that don't happen for another full season. The Visionaire cryptogram in Not What He Seems, the pivotal episode where Stan's true identity begins to unravel, translates to, he's lying. Someone you know is hiding the truth. The show was narrating its own plot in encrypted language in real time, weeks or months before casual viewers would understand what was being communicated. But here's the actual mystery. Not every cryptogram has been fully and definitively decoded. Some of the later Season 2 messages remain subjects of debate in the fan community. Some require keyword combinations that haven't been definitively confirmed. And even the messages that have been decoded raise further questions. Because if the writers were hiding this much in the credits alone, what else is encoded somewhere that no one has found yet? This question doesn't have an answer. It's the first thread, and it doesn't end. Mystery 2. Why does the opening theme contain multiple layers of backward audio, and what do all of them say? Most people who've watched Gravity Falls know about the reversed whisper, the one that says 3 letters back. But that's only the first layer. Over the course of the show's run, the reversed audio in the opening theme changes multiple times. Not just to update the cipher instructions, but with entirely different content during specific episodes and arcs. During the Weirdmageddon arc, near the series finale, the whisper in the theme changes to Bill Cipher's voice saying, "I'm watching you, nerds." The entire opening sequence changes too. The cheerful cartoon imagery is replaced with darker, stranger visuals, and Bill's presence contaminates the theme itself. But the question fans have never fully answered is, are there other reversed audio layers in the theme that haven't been found? The production team on Gravity Falls were known to embed Easter eggs obsessively, details that appear in single frames, background elements that reference things the show hasn't mentioned yet. The audio landscape of the theme is no different. There are form threads that have mapped every known reversed element, but the nature of the show's production suggests there may be details that haven't been cataloged. This is a show where the writers put secret messages in the source code of their own website. The audio engineering of the theme is, by this logic, almost certainly more complex than anyone has fully documented. Mystery 3. What are all the things Blendan Blandin is shown doing in the background before his formal introduction? Blendan Blandin, the time-traveling repairman from the year 20,712, with his camouflage suit and his nervous disposition, is one of those characters who appears in the background of multiple early episodes before the show ever acknowledges his existence. He's there in Tourist Trapped, the very first episode, visible in the background for a fraction of a second. He appears again in several subsequent episodes, always hovering at the edges of scenes, always in his camouflage suit, always before anyone knew who he was. This is a deliberate and quite beautiful piece of storytelling craft, when you rewatch the early episodes knowing who Blendan is and what he's there for, fixing time. Paradoxes that Dipper and Mabel haven't caused yet, but will. His background presence becomes unsettling in a very specific way. He's cleaning up messes from the future that haven't happened from the character's perspective. He's working in the margins of someone else's story. But here's the mystery. Have all of his background appearances actually been cataloged? The fan community has documented many of them, but Gravity Falls was animated with an extraordinary level of background detail, and a show that put this much intentional craft into every element of its construction may have included Blendan appearances that no one has spotted yet. And if there are undiscovered appearances, what are they specifically marking? What time anomalies are being repaired in those scenes? Mystery 4. What does the backwards audio say during Bill Cipher's first appearance in Dreamscapers? When Bill Cipher first appears in the Mindscape during Dreamscapers, the penultimate episode of Season 1, the sequence is full of deliberately unsettling audio design. There are sounds that play backwards, whispers layered under the regular dialogue, and a generally distorted quality to the entire dream sequence. Fans have reversed and analyzed most of the audio from this scene, but the results are not complete or universally agreed upon. Some of the backward audio resolves into recognizable phrases. Some of it appears to contain syllables that suggest words but don't quite form complete sentences. The question of what's actually encoded in the audio of that scene, and whether it contains lore, foreshadowing, or genuine hidden content, has never been definitively settled. Bill's introduction was one of the most carefully constructed sequences in the show's first season. It established his character, his power, his strange relationship with reality itself. It would be consistent with every other aspect of the show's design for that sequence to contain more layers than any single viewing, or even any single audio analysis, could fully capture. Mystery 5. The Polaroids in the opening. Who put them there and why those specific images? The opening credits of Gravity Falls feature a sequence of Polaroid photographs, snapshots of creatures, places, and events that appear throughout the show. Some of them are immediately recognizable as things that happen in the episodes. Others are more ambiguous. And a few, most notably one that appears to show Alex Hirsch himself standing behind the hand witch, have never been fully explained within the show's internal logic. The Polaroids include every major villain the twins encounter over the summer. Gnomes, the Summerween monster, Gideon, Blendin, the hand witch. This creates an odd narrative question. Who took these photographs? Who assembled them? The Pines family is new to Gravity Falls. They didn't take these before they arrived. The photos appear to be evidence that someone had prior knowledge of these specific encounters. Someone who knew before the summer began exactly what was going to happen. In the context of the show's mythology, that implies either a time traveler or Bill Cipher himself. Neither explanation is ever confirmed. If you've made it this far with me, and I'm glad you have, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are and what time it is. What corner of the world are you watching from? What's the lighting like? I love knowing where these videos find people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is genuinely a great moment to do it, because we have a very, very long way to go. Part 2, the number that's everywhere. Before we go any further into the specific mysteries, there's something you need to know about. Something that, once you notice it, you cannot unnotice. It is woven into the fabric of the show at a level that suggests either obsessive intentionality or something stranger. The number is 618. Mystery 6. What is the full extent of 618 appearances in Gravity Falls, and why this number? The show's main production code is G618. Stan's prisoner number, when he's arrested in Not What He Seems, is 061800. The Mystery Shack is located at 618 Gopher Road. The introduction page of the Real World Journal 3 prop book is dated June 18th. That's June 18th. In one of the shorts called Old Man McGucket's Conspiracy Corner Marathon, there's a segment literally titled 618, in which McGucket talks about a recurring number that has haunted his dreams, a number that comes from a creature from another dimension. June 18th is Alex Hirsch's birthday. That's the origin. It's his personal number, baked into everything he makes. But the question fans keep coming back to is, how many 618 appearances are there actually? The fan community has cataloged dozens, but the sheer visual density of the show's backgrounds means there are almost certainly more that haven't been found. Background signs, dates on newspapers, numbers on doors, prices at the mystery fair. Any of these could contain 618 in ways that have never been documented. And the McGucket short explicitly making the number into in-universe lore is its own fascinating layer, because it suggests that within the fiction of the show, the obsessive repetition of a number associated with a supernatural entity is meaningful. Which entity? Why this number? The joke is that it's the creator's birthday. The lore is that it means something. Both things can be true. Mystery 7. The June 15th premiere date and the Six Fingers birthday. Are these connected? Gravity Falls premiered on June 15th, 2012. Ford Pines was born on June 15th or 16th. The show's canon is ambiguous about this specific date, with Journal 3 giving slightly different information than what's stated on screen. Alex Hirsch has never explicitly confirmed whether the premiere date was chosen to align with Ford's birthday, or whether Ford's birthday was set to match the premiere date, or whether this is a coincidence. But here's what makes it feel deliberate. In the internal world of the show, Ford Pines is the researcher who started everything. He's the reason the journals exist, the reason the portal exists, the reason Bill Cipher was able to find his way into the physical world. He is, in a very real sense, the origin point of the entire narrative. Tying his birthday, even loosely, even ambiguously, to the date the show began feels like exactly the kind of layered gesture that Alex Hirsch would make. A private joke folded into the DNA of the show's calendar, but it's never confirmed, which means it remains a mystery. Is it meaningful? Is it coincidence? The answer depends on how much you trust the intentionality of a creator who put encrypted messages in the end credits of his first episode. Mystery 8. What other personal references from the production team are hidden in the show that fans haven't found? This is the meta-mystery. The crew of Gravity Falls was known for putting personal references, inside jokes, and subtle nods throughout every episode. Alex Hirsch's birthday in the production code. The name Gompers, which is apparently named after Samuel Gompers, the labor union leader. A choice that has never been explained in any interview as having thematic significance, which means it either has none or the significance hasn't been found yet. The voice actors, the writers, the animators, all of them worked on a show that celebrated hiding things for sharp-eyed viewers to find. It would be strange if only the creator had left personal traces. Some of what's been found, the name Aoshima on a sign in the background, a reference to director John Aoshima. The Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel, a group founded by crew members referenced in the show's ARG. But these are the ones that have been noticed. How many more are there? This question will never have a definitive answer because the people who know are the people who hid them, and they haven't told us everything. Part 3. The wheel and what it means. Let's talk about the thing that flashes at the very end of the opening credits. You've seen it. 10 symbols arranged in a circle around a triangle with a single eye. Most viewers see it and think, okay, creepy little logo, move on. But this wheel is not decoration. This wheel is a prophecy. And the gap between when it first appears and when the show explains it is one of the most extraordinary examples of long-form foreshadowing in animated television. Mystery 9. Who created the Cipher Wheel, and what is its actual origin in the show's lore? The Cipher Wheel, sometimes called the Bill Cipher Zodiac, shows 10 symbols, each corresponding to a specific person. The pine tree for Dipper, the shooting star for Mabel, the six-fingered hand for Ford, the question mark for Seuss, the bag of ice for Wendy, the llama for Pacifica Northwest, the glasses for Old Man McGucket, the crescent moon for Gideon, the heart for Robbie Valentino, and the pentagram for... well, that one's debated. Ford explains in Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, that the wheel is an ancient prophecy, that 10 symbols, united together, create a force strong enough to defeat Bill Cipher. He discovered the wheel carved into a cave in Gravity Falls, along with hieroglyphics about Bill, long before he ever summoned the demon. The native people of the region, the ones who lived in what would become Gravity Falls, had encoded this prophecy into the landscape itself. But here's the question. Who were those people? The show gives us glimpses of Gravity Falls' pre-colonial history. There's the founding of the town, a deeply strange story involving the 8th President of the United States, which we'll get to. But before that, there was apparently a civilization that knew about Bill Cipher, knew about the specific 10 people who would one day be significant in the town, and encoded the method of his defeat into the rocks. How? Why these 10 people? How did a pre-Columbian civilization know that Seuss Ramirez would one day be the question mark, or that a girl named Pacifica Northwest would carry the llama? The wheel works as plot resolution in the finale. Its origin remains genuinely unexplained. Mystery 10. Why does the wheel fail in the show, and was its failure inevitable? In Weirdmageddon 3, Ford assembles the 10 people of the Zodiac to activate the wheel and defeat Bill. It almost works. All 10 join hands, the ritual begins to build, and then Stan and Ford get into an argument. The unity breaks. The ritual fails. Bill interrupts and captures both of them, which forces the twins and their friends to come up with a different plan, the memory gun gambit, that actually defeats Bill. The question fans have long discussed is whether the wheel was ever meant to work. Alex Hirsch has given somewhat contradictory signals in interviews and online interactions. The official story is that the wheel failed because Stan and Ford couldn't put aside their issues. But there's a more troubling reading. Maybe Bill engineered the situation so that the one prophecy that could defeat him was always going to collapse in exactly this way. Maybe he'd spent decades studying the 10 symbols, learning their personalities, understanding that Ford's pride and Stan's resentment would fracture the ritual at the crucial moment. Maybe the whole Weirdmageddon plan was designed with the wheel's failure built in. If that's the case, then Bill Cipher's defeat wasn't a defeat at all. It was something Bill didn't plan for, something that came from outside the parameters of any prophecy. And that raises the question, What was the memory gun gambit in cosmic terms? Was it a genuine surprise, or was there something even older and stranger at work? Something like the Axolotl, watching from outside the pattern and nudging events toward a different outcome. The show doesn't tell us. The question doesn't resolve. Mystery 11. What does each symbol on the wheel represent beyond its character? Each symbol on the cipher wheel is the personal emblem of a specific character. But why that emblem? The pine tree makes sense for Dipper. It's on his hat. It's his identifier. It evokes the Oregon forest where the show is set. The shooting star for Mabel is a reference to her sweater, a recurring motif, her sense of wonder. The six-fingered hand for Ford is obvious. His polydactyly is literally the physical anomaly that launched his entire career. But some of the symbols have deeper resonance that the show teases without fully unpacking. The crescent moon for Gideon. The moon has associations with illusion, with things that are only partially visible, with the hidden side of things. Gideon spends much of the show presenting a false version of himself, the adorable child psychic, while concealing his actual nature. The moon is the perfect symbol for a character defined by what he hides. But the show never makes this connection explicit. The sewn-up heart for Robbie, a repaired thing, a damaged thing, a wound that's been stitched closed. Robbie's entire character arc is about grief and his inability to process it. Is the heart symbolism intentional? Almost certainly. Is it ever discussed in the show? No. These resonances exist, and they reward the viewer who looks for them, but they're never fully articulated. They sit at the edge of the show's consciousness, half confirmed and half mysterious, like so much else in Gravity Falls. Part 4. Bill Cipher and the World He Destroyed. Now we arrive at the figure at the center of everything. The triangle, the eye, the one who's been watching from the beginning. Bill Cipher is one of the most carefully constructed antagonists in modern animation. He is ancient in a way that makes most fictional villains look recent. He is powerful in a way that the show never fully caps or quantifies. And he is sad in a way that the show spends most of its runtime concealing, only revealing in fragments, in poems from cosmic entities, in hints dropped in companion books, in backwards audio at the moment of his destruction. Mystery 12. What actually happened when Bill destroyed his home dimension? Bill Cipher is from the second dimension, a flat world, two-dimensional, with what Bill describes as flat minds and flat ideas. He was, in this world, unusual. He could perceive the third dimension, which was apparently illegal, or at least deeply stigmatized in his society. The Book of Bill, released in 2023, adds layers to this. Bill's parents, concerned about his strange visions, took him to a doctor who wanted to eliminate this perception. There are ciphers in the book that suggest his childhood was marked by isolation and misunderstanding. He eventually destroyed his home dimension. This is stated as fact in the show. What the show doesn't fully clarify, and what the Book of Bill raises more questions about, is whether it was intentional. The TV Tropes page for Bill Cipher notes that the book leaves some of his backstory ambiguous and indicates the destruction was likely an accident that he regrets. The Axolotl's poem says he saw his own dimension burn. He saw it, not caused it, though he is the cause. And the line, "blame the arson for the fire," implies he carries guilt about something he did, but may have partially rationalized. The shape of what happened seems to be this. Bill, isolated and misunderstood in his flat world, desperate to reach a larger reality, did something that burned it down. Whether in an attempt to liberate his people from the constraints of their two-dimensional existence, or as an accident in the process of trying to break through to a higher dimension, or as an act of rage and desperation, the dimension burned. His family died. Everyone he knew died. And Bill, floating in the aftermath, chose to believe he had done something righteous. But here's what's never answered. What exactly was the mechanism? What did he actually do? The Book of Bill talks about him keeping the last remaining atoms of his home dimension in his hat. It talks about him looking more distant than Ford had ever seen him when the subject comes up. These are emotional details, not mechanical ones. The actual sequence of events in the destruction of Euclidia, That's the dimension's name, Euclidia, a reference to Euclidean geometry, is never shown, never described in full. We have a portrait of its emotional aftermath and almost nothing of the event itself. Mystery. 13. How old is Bill Cipher exactly, and what was he doing between Euclidia's destruction and his first contact with the natives of Gravity Falls? Bill says in various points in the show that he has existed for trillions of years. He refers to specific events from inconceivably long ago. In one exchange, he mentions that his physical form last existed in reality 1 billion years ago during the time of the horses. He claims to have roamed the nightmare realm, the chaotic interdimensional space between dimensions, for unspecified eons before finding a way to reach human minds. The nightmare realm is described as a place with no consistent physics, no rules, a kind of metaphysical foam between realities. Bill ruled it somehow despite it being lawless by definition. He was apparently the dominant entity in a space defined by the absence of dominant entities. What does it mean to rule chaos? And what was he doing specifically in the billions of years between the destruction of his home and his first contact with the early inhabitants of what would become Gravity Falls, Oregon? The show tells us, via Ford's discovery of the cave carvings, that the indigenous people of the region had contact with Bill long before Ford. They feared him. They knew enough about him to encode the prophecy of his defeat into the landscape. They knew about the cipher wheel. They called him something, some name or title that doesn't survive into the show's modern timeline, replaced by the identity Bill constructed for his dealings with English-speaking humans. What were those early encounters like? What did Bill want from those people? Did he try to get them to build a portal? Did he find the thing he was looking for before the portal was even conceivable? The show gestures at this history and then leaves it unresolved in the past. Mystery 14. What is Bill Cipher's real name? Bill states at some point that his true name, his actual name, not the identity Bill Cipher that he constructed for dealing with humans, would cause anyone who heard it to expire with an expression of horror and ecstasy on their face. He took on the name Bill Cipher because it was comprehensible to the human minds he was dealing with, a name that could be spoken without consequence. The reference to the Beale cipher is apparent in the name. The Beale cipher is a famous, real-world, unsolved cryptographic puzzle involving buried treasure. And Bill, of course, also refers to currency, tying the name to both the Eye of Providence on the back of the American dollar and to the tradition of coded messages. These are the human meanings his adopted name points toward. But his actual name, the one that destroys you to hear, we never learn. It hasn't been given in any canonical source, not in the show, not in Journal 3, not in the Book of Bill. This might be the most purely unanswerable mystery on this list. It's not that there's a real answer being concealed, it's that Alex Hirsch has never given one in any format at any time. The name is Mystery as Function. The point is that you can't know it, that some truths are structured in a way that prevents their own transmission. Mystery 15. What happened to the henchmaniacs after Weirdmageddon? During Weirdmageddon, Bill summons his companions from the Nightmare Realm. 8-Ball, Teeth, Keyhole, Cryptos, Hectagon, Amorphous Shape, Pyronica, Pacifier, and Lava Lamp-shaped Entity. These are Bill's associates, bizarre and visually grotesque entities who seem to follow him out of a combination of loyalty and shared desire for chaos. When Bill is defeated and the dimensional rift closes, these entities are sucked back into the Nightmare Realm. The show doesn't follow them any further. But the comic story Gravity Falls Lost Legends, specifically a story set after Weirdmageddon, briefly shows 8-Ball and Keyhole in what appears to be another dimension, looking at a statue of Bill labeled, "He was the worst." This is played as dark comedy, but it raises a real question. What happened to the Nightmare Realm after Bill's defeat? Bill was apparently its dominant entity. He was the organizing force in a space defined by chaos. With Bill gone, not just imprisoned, but apparently erased, what is the Nightmare Realm now? Is it simply chaos without even the organizing principle of Bill's consciousness? Are the henchmaniacs still there? Are they looking for a new center? And Cryptos, who appears to have some special connection to cryptographic systems, given the name. What specifically is their deal? They appear briefly in the Weirdmageddon arc, barely distinguished from the other henchmaniacs. Their individual characters and histories are almost entirely unexplored. Mystery 16. Why does Bill hate the crypto's code specifically? Bill Cipher's official character profile on various wikis lists his dislikes, and one of the most intriguing entries is simply the crypto's code. Kryptos is a famous real-world encrypted sculpture at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, a sculpture that contains 4 encoded messages, 3 of which have been solved and 1 of which remains unsolved as of today. The 4th section of the Kryptos sculpture is one of the most famous unsolved cryptographic puzzles in the world. Bill Cipher, a being defined by his own encryption, by his name being derived from cipher systems, by his obsessive dealings and deals in coded information, specifically dislikes a real-world encoded message that nobody has been able to crack. Why the show never explains this. It's listed as a character trait, a detail, something about Bill's personality. Is it because the unsolved cipher represents something that operates outside his understanding? Is there something in the 4th section of Kryptos that relates to the Gravity Falls mythology in a way the show never made explicit? This is one of the stranger details in Bill's character profile, and it sits there without context, without explanation, quietly refusing to resolve. Part 5. The Axolotl and the Question That Never Got an Answer. There is a being in the Gravity Falls universe who appears exactly once in the canonical material, briefly referenced in a hidden section of a choose-your-own-adventure book, and who is described as possessing power beyond Time Baby, beyond Bill Cipher, beyond any entity that operates within the show's normal frame of reference. A creature who speaks in verse, who offers second chances to destroy demons, and whose name Bill Cipher screams at the moment of his apparent death. This is the Axolotl. Mystery 17. Who or what is the Axolotl in theological terms? The show describes the Axolotl as a powerful extra-dimensional creature whose power ranks massively above Time Baby, Bill Cipher, and other types of powerful extra-dimensional creatures. They take the form of a giant talking axolotl, an actual amphibian that exists in the real world, native to Mexico, famous for its ability to regenerate lost limbs. In Aztec mythology, Xolotl, the source of the word axolotl, is a dog-headed deity associated with lightning, death, fire, and the guidance of the dead. In the hidden Choose-Your-Own-Adventure section, Dipper asks the axolotl about Bill Cipher and receives the poem, 60 degrees that come in threes / watches from within birch trees / saw his own dimension burn / misses home, and can't return / says he's happy, he's a liar / blame the arson for the fire. / if he wants to shirk the blame, / he'll have to invoke my name, / one way to absolve his crime / a different form, a different time. This poem is addressed to Dipper, but is entirely about Bill. It confirms that Bill destroyed his home dimension, that he misses it, that his projected happiness is a lie, and that there is a path toward his absolution, invoking the axolotl's name, taking a different form in a different time. The fact that Bill's reversed final words in the series finale are AXOLOTL, my time has come to burn, I invoke the ancient power that I may return, confirms that Bill understood this path and attempted it. But who is the axolotl in the larger cosmology? The show gives us Time Baby as the controller of time, Bill as a dream demon, various other entities with specific domains. The axolotl exists above all of them. They appear to operate on something like redemption. They offer Bill a chance at a different existence. They seem to function as a cosmic judge or counselor, but their nature, their origin, their relationship to the other entities in the Gravity Falls universe, none of this is explained. We know they exist. We know they are immensely powerful. We know they offered Bill something. Everything else is questions. Mystery 18. Did Bill Cipher actually survive? And what form did he take? The Book of Bill, published in 2023, definitively confirms that Bill did survive his apparent erasure in Stan's mind. When Bill invoked the axolotl, he was brought out of space and time and given a kind of cosmic sentencing. He must join a therapeutic program, the Theraprism, and genuinely confront his own feelings and past. Bill, thinking he's escaped, agrees only to discover that the Theraprism is essentially his worst nightmare, a place where he is forced to be honest with himself. The Book of Bill is framed as this therapeutic journal that Bill sends back to Earth, against the rules of the Theraprism. So, in the current canonical state of the Gravity Falls universe, Bill is alive, imprisoned in a cosmic rehabilitation facility, undergoing infinite karmic rehabilitation, and sneaking out coded messages in the form of a book that fans in our world can read. This is a remarkable narrative construction. It keeps Bill alive while containing him. It gives the villain a story that continues after his defeat, without undermining the emotional resolution of the finale. But it also raises questions. What is the Theraprism exactly? Who runs it? Is the Axolotl the warden or merely the judge? And when the poem says, a different form, a different time, the book suggests Bill will eventually be reincarnated into a new life form after completing his rehabilitation. What will that be? When? And will whatever Bill becomes have any memory of what Bill's cipher was? Mystery 19. Why does the Axolotl offer redemption to a being who committed omnicide? This is the philosophical question at the heart of the Axolotl mystery. Bill's cipher destroyed his entire home dimension. He killed everyone in it, his family, everyone he had ever known. He spent trillions of years causing chaos across the multiverse. He tortured people, he enslaved them. He tried to merge the nightmare realm with the physical world, which would have ended reality as experienced by every human being on Earth. And the Axolotl offers him a path to absolution. The poem says if he wants to shirk the blame, he'll have to invoke my name. This isn't the Axolotl saying if he wants to escape justice. It's saying if he wants to actually be free of the weight of what he did. There's a specific kind of redemption being offered. Not escape, but genuine accountability. The different form in a different time isn't a reward. According to the Book of Bill, it's a sentence. A full life lived as something other than a chaos demon, presumably having to navigate the ordinary struggles of existence with none of the power he once had. But why? What is the Axolotl's investment in Bill Cipher's redemption? The show never answers this. The cosmic framework of the Gravity Falls universe appears to include something like moral law, a conviction that even the worst things can be reoriented, given sufficient time and genuine reckoning. This is either the show's most optimistic idea or its most disturbing one, depending on your interpretation. Now let's move away from Bill for a moment, because as central as he is, the show is full of mysteries that have nothing to do with a triangle demon. Mysteries that live in the quiet, weird details of the town itself and the people who inhabit it. Part 6, Ford Pines and the Science That Broke Everything. Stanford Philbrick Pines, Ph.D. Known to the show's audience as the author for the entire first season and half of the second, is one of the most tragic figures in the show's lineup. He is a man who was brilliant in a way that left him completely vulnerable, who was manipulated in a way that destroyed decades of his life, and who returned from 30 years lost between dimensions to find that his brother had been living his life without him. Mystery 20. What did Ford experience in the 30 years he spent traveling between dimensions? Ford fell into the universe portal in the early 1980s. He returned in 2012. Those 30 years were spent traversing dimensions, plural, surviving in realities with different physical laws, different inhabitants, different dangers. The show gives us tantalizing glimpses of what some of these dimensions were like. Ford references specific encounters. Journal 3 contains notes from his dimensional travels, but the full scope of what he experienced in 3 decades of interdimensional survival is never mapped. He clearly came back changed. He has skills, combat abilities, and physical resilience that he didn't have before he left. He installed a metal plate in his head, pre-existing, before he fell in to prevent Bill from possessing him, but the plate itself seems to have been reinforced during his travels. He has weapons. He has knowledge of interdimensional physics that goes beyond what he learned in Gravity Falls. He is, in some ways, more prepared for the apocalypse than anyone else in the show's cast. But what did he lose? What did those 30 years cost him? The show focuses heavily on the emotional cost, the missed time with his brother, the grief and resentment, the sense of a life derailed. But the psychological cost of spending 3 decades in genuine alien dimensions, without any human contact, without the anchoring presence of other people, that's almost never discussed. Ford came back, and he seemed functional. But functional and whole are different things, and the show never fully interrogates the gap between them. Mystery 21. What exactly did McGucket see when he was briefly sucked into the portal? When Ford and McGucket first tested the universe portal, something went wrong. McGucket was partially pulled into the portal. His head and upper body were briefly exposed to whatever exists on the other side, and he saw something. He came back from that partial view mentally shattered. He quit on the spot, warned Ford that he was going to bring about the end of the world, and eventually founded the Society of the Blind Eye specifically to erase his own memory of what he'd seen. What did he see? The show implies it was the nightmare realm, the chaotic void that Bill was trying to access from the other side. Bill's actual home territory, unfiltered, in all its reality-dissolving horror. A place where the laws of physics don't apply, where causality might be optional, where existence itself operates on different terms than anything a human mind is built to comprehend. But here's the specific thing. McGucket only saw it for a moment. Ford fell into it and survived it for 30 years. The show positions McGucket's brief exposure as the thing that broke him, but Ford's full immersion, while obviously traumatic, didn't shatter him in the same immediate way. What does that difference say about what McGucket specifically saw? Was it something that happened to be visible from the portal's aperture that wouldn't be visible from deeper inside? Something specific to the boundary between dimensions rather than the nightmare realm itself? Or is it simply that McGucket's personality was more vulnerable to that particular kind of existential rupture? The show gestures at an answer and doesn't commit to one. McGucket, after recovering his memories at the end of the series, seems to be at peace. Whatever he saw, he apparently found a way to integrate it. But we never learn what it actually was. Mystery 22. Why did Bill want the portal built, and why did he need Ford specifically? Bill's entire long-form plan hinged on getting Ford to build the universe portal. He disguised himself as a muse, a partner, a brilliant companion, feeding Ford insights, answers, inspiration, manipulating him with flattery and with the genuine satisfaction of scientific collaboration. Over years, Bill guided Ford toward building a machine that would eventually allow the dimensional rift to open, and Bill to cross into the physical world. The question is, why Ford? Why this specific human, at this specific time, in this specific place? Bill has been interacting with humans for as long as there have been humans in Gravity Falls. He contacted the indigenous people. He presumably tried other avenues. What made Ford uniquely useful or uniquely vulnerable for this particular project? The show suggests several answers. Ford's genius, his isolation, his profound need to be recognized as special, his vulnerability to a being who told him his 6 fingers made him extraordinary rather than strange. Bill found the perfect psychological architecture in Ford, a brilliant, lonely, approval-starved man who had been told his whole life that his difference was a deficiency, and who would be extraordinarily susceptible to an entity that framed that same difference as destiny. But there's a more structural question. Was Ford the only option, or was he just the most efficient one? Could Bill have achieved the same result through a different human, in a different time? The show implies that the Gravity Falls anomalies, whatever makes the town so supernaturally strange, are what made the portal possible. Which means the portal had to be built in Gravity Falls specifically. And the person most likely to come to Gravity Falls to study its anomalies was, almost inevitably, a scientist with Ford's specific profile. Was Ford destiny? Or was he just the highest probability outcome of Bill searching for a suitable collaborator over centuries? Mystery 23. What happened to the metal plate in Ford's head? Ford installed a metal plate in his head, apparently before the events the show depicts, as a precaution against Bill possessing him through his dreams. This detail is revealed in The Last Mabelcorn and is framed as evidence of Ford's deep fear of and respect for Bill's abilities. The question fans have asked is, how did he install it? Who did the surgery? Ford had been living in Gravity Falls with his relationship with Bill already turned hostile by the time he built his bunker and hid his journals. He was, at that point, apparently living in isolation, driven to the edge of his sanity by his fear of Bill and his paranoia about being watched. Hiring a neurosurgeon in that context, or doing the surgery himself, which seems both implausible and perfectly in keeping with Ford's character, is a detail the show drops without context. And a further question, does the plate still work? After 30 years of interdimensional travel, after all the physical trauma Ford's body went through, after Weirdmageddon, is the plate intact? Is Ford still protected? The show ends without addressing this. Given that Bill is currently alive in the Theraprism, this isn't an entirely academic question. Mystery 24. What is the grand unified theory of weirdness that Ford was working toward? Ford's stated goal throughout the show is to build a grand unified theory of weirdness, a complete scientific framework that explains all of the supernatural phenomena in Gravity Falls. His 3 journals are steps toward this, but he was sucked into the portal before he could complete his research. After returning, he has access to 30 additional years of interdimensional observations and experience. The show ends with Ford and Stan sailing away on the Stano Wars. Renamed, the 2 brothers finally embarking on the adventure they dreamed of as children. Ford is, presumably, continuing his research in some form. But we never see the grand unified theory. We don't know if it's possible. We don't know if Gravity Falls' weirdness admits of a single unified explanation, or whether the randomness is itself a fundamental feature of the phenomenon. What would such a theory look like? The floating cliffs? The supernatural creatures? The concentration of anomalies? Is there a mechanism underneath all of it? The show suggests that the Nightmare Realm's proximity to our dimension, amplified by Bill's long years of pressure against the boundary, might explain some of it. But even that feels incomplete. There's something about the specific location of Gravity Falls, Oregon, coordinates 44.793531, minus 121.556397. That seems meaningful. The weirdness predates Bill's interest in the area. It attracted Ford, but Ford came because the weirdness was already there. What made it that way? Part 7. The Journals and What They Hide. 3 journals. 3 volumes of research, compiled over 6 years of paranoid, obsessive, brilliant Amal investigation. We've seen large portions of Journal 3. It's the one Dipper carries, the one that guides most of the show's Monster of the Week structure. We've seen pieces of Journal 2, the one Gideon possesses for most of Season 1. We've seen almost nothing of Journal 1. Mystery 25. What is the full contents of Journal 1? Journal 1 covers Ford's first 3 years in Gravity Falls. The fan-released real-world replica of Journal 3 gives us some of its contents: descriptions of the floating cliffs, notes about geographic anomalies, early research into the machine he was building. But Journal 1 is, in the context of the show's history, the origin document. It's where Ford first documented the weird, first categorized the phenomena, first began to understand, or think he understood, what Gravity Falls was. What's in the pages we haven't seen? Journal 3 suggests that Journal 1 contains information about a weremaid, one of many examples of why some animals should not breed. There are references to unicorns, to the 30-hour arm wrestling challenge, to early notes about the portal machine. But these are fragments. The full contents of Journal 1, which is described as the thickest of the 3 volumes, suggesting it has the most pages, are largely unknown. The show's arc eventually disposes of all 3 journals by having Dipper throw them into the bottomless pit at the end of the finale, giving Ford his copies back. The journals go on, presumably, to be held by Ford and Stan on their adventures. They are not destroyed. They are somewhere, moving through dimensions. Their contents are not ours. Mystery 26. How did Gideon Gleeful find Journal 2? Gideon obtained Journal 2 as a child, before the events of the show. It was apparently buried near Gravity Falls Elementary School. Gideon, as a young child, found it buried there. This is mentioned in passing, but never fully explained. Ford buried Journal 2 deliberately, as part of his plan to keep the 3 journals separated so that no single person could use them all to activate the portal. He chose different hiding locations for each volume. The fact that he buried Journal 2 near an elementary school where a gifted, perceptive, strange child would eventually find it is either a coincidence or something more calculated. Was there a reason for that specific location? Did Ford know something about that ground, about that spot? Or did Gideon simply dig in the right place for reasons that had nothing to do with the journal's significance? More importantly, how did an 8 or 9-year-old Gideon have the presence of mind to keep the journal, study it, understand it well enough to eventually become a child psychic using its secrets? The show establishes that Gideon is genuinely intelligent and genuinely ruthless beneath his performative adorability. But the gap between child finds a mysterious book and child systematically exploits its contents to build a psychic empire is a gap the show spans with very little detail. Mystery 27. What is Journal 2's entry on blood rain, and has it happened recently? Journal 2 contains an entry on blood rain, a phenomenon that apparently occurs periodically near the woods around Gravity Falls. The entry notes that it's unpredictable and rare and that it has occurred multiple times before in the past. We see no blood rain in the show itself. This is entirely journal-documented phenomenon that never appears on screen. What causes blood rain in Gravity Falls? Is it a supernatural phenomenon like the floating cliffs, something that's just part of the town's weirdness? Or is it a specific effect of proximity to the nightmare realm, something that increases in frequency as the dimensional boundary weakens? If it became more frequent in the period leading up to Weirdmageddon, as Bill was pushing harder and harder against the barrier between his realm and ours, then it would be a measurable indicator of his increasing power. But we never see this measured. We never see anyone respond to it. The blood rain happens somewhere in the past, in the pages of a journal, and then doesn't come up again. Mystery 28. 28. What was the terrible fate that Journal 3 warns about regarding the Society of the Blind Eye? Journal 3's entry on the Society of the Blind Eye warns that the organization exists specifically to erase memories of supernatural events from Gravity Falls citizens. This is eventually revealed, and the Society is dismantled. But Ford's original notes on the Society, written before he was sucked into the portal, based presumably on his observations of the organization forming, include a warning about terrible consequences for those who use the memory-erasing technology excessively. McGucket is the primary example. Decades of memory erasure have left him barely functional, living in his own filth, speaking in confused rambles. But the journal's warning about terrible fate is broader than just McGucket. Is there something else, a larger, more catastrophic consequence of the blind eye technology that Ford was worried about? Something that goes beyond individual cognitive damage? The show dismantles the Society and McGucket recovers his memories, but it never fully addresses what Ford originally feared the organization might eventually cause. Part 8. The Pines Family's Hidden History Mystery. 29. Who are Dipper and Mabel's parents, and why are they so invisible? In the show's 2 seasons, Dipper and Mabel's parents are almost completely absent. We see their arms briefly in the pilot episode, reaching into the car to drop the twins off at stands. We never see their faces. We never hear their names clearly. We know they exist. We know they're Stan's great-niece and great-nephew, which means Stan is the twins' great-uncle through their parents' side. So one of their parents is a Pines sibling. The show's family tree, as best as fans have reconstructed it from canon information, suggests that Dipper and Mabel's parent, who is a Pines child, is one of Stan and Ford's siblings. Shermie Pines, the third sibling, is mentioned in A Tale of Two Stans. So their parent is presumably Shermie's child, making Stan and Ford their great-great-uncles, which the show simplifies to Grunkle. But Shermie Pines is barely a character. We know his name. We know he exists. We know essentially nothing else about him. And Dipper and Mabel's parents, whoever they are, whatever their lives look like, why they agreed to send their children to spend an entire summer with a Stan they presumably don't know well, are more absent from the show than almost any other implied character. This isn't an accident. Alex Hirsch has acknowledged that the parents are invisible by design. They represent the part of childhood that the show is about escaping from. the ordinary world that Gravity Falls is a departure from. But their total absence means we never understand why they're so willing to leave their 12-year-olds in a tourist trap run by a probable con man for 3 months. Mystery 30. What is Dipper's real name? This is perhaps the most famous and persistently discussed mystery in the entire show. Dipper is a nickname. It comes from the birthmark on his forehead in the shape of the Big Dipper constellation. His sister calls him Dipper. Everyone calls him Dipper. Even his official identity within the show uses Dipper. But the show establishes clearly and deliberately that Dipper is not his legal name. Alex Hirsch has teased the real name multiple times. He said it's similar to Mabel, which could mean it starts with M or shares a rhythm or references something about the night sky, Mabel being a reference to the maple tree, which is itself a kind of pointing toward the natural world. He said it will be revealed one day. As of the show's end and the publication of the companion books, it has not been revealed. The fan community has proposed many candidates: Mason, Matthew, Monroe, Marcus. The Mason theory is particularly popular because of its connection to masonry, to the Eye of Providence, to the kind of esoteric secret society mythology that runs through Gravity Falls. But it remains a theory. The real name is one of those mysteries that Alex Hirsch seems genuinely reluctant to resolve. As if the name itself, now that so many people have wondered about it, is more interesting as a question than any answer could make it. Mystery 31. What is Wendy Corduroy's mother's story? Wendy Corduroy, the Mystery Shack's teenage cashier, Dipper's unrequited crush for most of the show, eventually one of the central heroes of Weirdmageddon, has a father, Manly Dan, who appears regularly. She has brothers. She has a family structure that the show uses for comedy. But her mother is never mentioned. Never once. She doesn't appear, she isn't referenced. There's no indication of whether she's dead, divorced, gone in some other way, or simply in absence. In a show where the parents of the main characters are conspicuously absent, and that absence carries meaning, Wendy's missing mother is notable. Manly Dan Corduroy is a character defined by performance of strength, by the front of hardness, which is a very specific kind of characterization for a single parent to have. The suggestion that there's grief underneath the performance, that the hyper-masculine posturing conceals something, is there for anyone who wants to read it. But it's never made explicit. Mystery 32. What is the origin story of Sue's absent father? Sos Ramirez, the Mystery Shack's handyman, Dipper and Mabel's adult friend, eventually Grunkle Seuss, when he takes over the Mystery Shack in the finale, has a very specific, very painful absence in his life. His father. So's father left when he was young and has been sending birthday cards ever since. Not showing up, just cards. Every year a card. The show uses this as the setup for an incredibly tender episode, Blendon's Game, where Dipper and Mabel use time travel to go back to a birthday when young Seuss was devastated by his father not showing up. They don't fix it. They can't, but they make it slightly less alone. The show doesn't give Seuss' father much more definition than this. He's an absence defined by the birthday cards. His reasons for leaving are not explored. His continued non-presence in Seuss' adult life, even when Seuss becomes a successful businessman running the Mystery Shack, isn't addressed. There's no resolution story. Seuss has found family in Stan, in Dipper and Mabel, in his grandmother. But the original wound is never closed because the show isn't that kind of show. It doesn't tie everything up neatly. Some absences remain absences. Mystery 33. What happened to Stan and Ford's parents after Stan was thrown out? Stan and Ford's father, Philbrick Pines, made one of the cruelest decisions in the show's backstory. When Stan accidentally, or not accidentally, this is never fully resolved, destroyed Ford's science fair project, costing him a scholarship to a prestigious university, Philbrick threw Stan out of the house. 17 years old, told he was no longer welcome, sent into the world with nothing. This is the event that set in motion 30 years of separation, identity theft, and eventually the whole machinery of the portal. What happened to Philbrick and their mother after that? The show establishes that Shermie, the third sibling, apparently stayed in contact with Stan to some degree, or at least Stan stayed aware enough of the family to know that Shermie had children. but Philbrick and the unnamed mother essentially vanish from the story after the flashback. They presumably died, but the show never addresses what became of them, whether Stan ever saw them again, whether Ford ever tried to rebuild that relationship after returning from the dimensions. For Stan, who spent 30 years doing something enormously difficult and costly for a brother who wouldn't even know he was doing it, knowing that the father who threw him out was somewhere out there living a life never aware of what his son was sacrificing, that's a weight the show acknowledges without resolving. Part 9. Gompers the Goat. Let's talk about the goat, Gompers, named after the 19th century labor leader Samuel Gompers, which is the kind of utterly inexplicable creative decision that Gravity Falls specializes in. A small, unassuming, 1.5-horned goat who lives around the Mystery Shack, eats things that shouldn't be edible, shows up in the background of nearly every single outdoor scene, and whose eyes on me, when you look at them, when you really look, are horizontal pupilled, pale yellow, and positioned on his face in a way that, if you rotated them 60 degrees, would look almost exactly like Bill Cipher's single eye. Mystery 34. What is Gompers, actually? The popular theory throughout the show's run was that Gompers was Bill Cipher in disguise, that the demon, unable to directly access the Mystery Shack due to various protections, had found a way to observe the Pines family by inhabiting the form of the goat that was always nearby. The eyes, the timing of his appearances, the way he always seems to be present during significant events. The fact that he appears in the very first scene where Dipper finds Journal 3, watching from a few feet away as this world-altering discovery is made. The Book of Bill addressed this directly. Bill states that goats are the only life forms whose pupils stay the same while being possessed. This was a direct acknowledgement of the theory, and it doesn't confirm it, but it doesn't deny it either. It adds a layer. Bill knows that goat eyes look possessed-like normally, implying he knows people have compared Gompers to a possessed creature. His statement about goat pupils is either a meta-commentary on the theory or an in-universe piece of information that suggests Bill has experimented with goat possession. A separate theory, circulated on Tumblr and in the Gravity Falls wiki forums, suggests that Gompers might be a transformed human, specifically that the cryptogram in Journal 3, "Never trust a witch, they'll curse your ear and turn you into an immortal goat, so I hear," might refer to Gompers specifically. The in-universe ARG website has a story called A Forgotten Tale, about a wizard named Grember who loses an ear in a deal with a witch. Gompers has only 1.5 horns. The connection between a missing horn and a lost ear in a witch-dealing story has never been confirmed as intentional, but the overlapping details are there. In Gravity Falls, Legend of the Gnome Gemulets, a video game, it's revealed that Gompers is a forest protector. This is a much more benign interpretation. Gompers as an ancient guardian spirit in the form of a goat, watching over the land in ways that humans misread as eccentricity. A forest protector might appear at the moment Dipper finds the journal not to spy, but to ensure the discovery happens safely. Might eat at supernatural objects not out of ordinary goat behavior, but out of some form of ritual cleansing. None of these interpretations is confirmed. Gompers remains, in the final canonical state of the show, a goat. Just a goat. Who happens to be named after a labor leader, who happens to have eyes that look possessed, who happens to be everywhere. Mystery 35. How did Stan actually get Gompers? A cutscene from Blendon's game, not shown in the episode but documented in supplementary materials, reveals that Stan got Gompers when a man tried to pay for a tour of the Mystery Shack with a baby goat. Stan accepted. This is the official origin. A man with a baby goat, using the animal as currency to visit a tourist trap. But who was this man? Why did he have a baby goat? Why was he in Gravity Falls? The show presents this as a comedy beat, Stan's willingness to accept anything as payment. But within the context of a show where everything is potentially significant, the man with a goat story raises questions. Was he a local? A traveler? Someone who knew what Gompers would become in the Mystery Shack's ecosystem? Was there something about Gompers specifically that prompted him to give the goat away rather than sell it or keep it? The cutscene doesn't give us these details. It gives us the bare facts of the transaction, nothing more. In a show about paying close attention to bare facts, the bare facts are always the beginning of the question. Mystery 36. What did Gompers do with the flash drive Ford gave him? In A Tale of Two Stands, Ford feeds a flash drive, containing compromising information about the government agent's powers and trigger, to Gompers. The implication is that Gompers will eat it and the evidence will be gone. This works, from a plot perspective. The agents can no longer threaten the Pines family with what's on the drive. But did Gompers actually eat it? The scene cuts away before we confirm this, and given every theory about Gompers being something more than an ordinary goat, the possibility that the goat chose not to eat the drive, kept it, somehow delivered it somewhere, used it for purposes none of the human characters understand, is tantalizing. What would a possessed goat, or a forest protector, or a witch-transformed human do with a flash drive containing government intelligence about a supernatural anomaly? The answer is unknowable. The question is wonderful. Part 10. The Society of the Blind Eye. The Society of the Blind Eye is one of the show's most quietly horrifying inventions. A secret organization founded by Old Man McGucket, whose stated purpose is to erase memories of supernatural events from Gravity Falls citizens who have been traumatized by encounters with the paranormal. On its surface, it sounds almost protective. The reality is something much darker. Mystery 37. How many people in Gravity Falls have had memories erased? And what were those memories? The Society has been operating for decades. McGucket himself has erased his own memory so many times that he barely knows who he is at the start of the show. But beyond McGucket, the show establishes that the Society has been actively serving customers, people who came to them, or were brought to them, or who sought them out after encounters with the supernatural. The extent of this operation is never quantified. How many Gravity Falls citizens have had pieces of their memory removed? What were those memories specifically? Some of them presumably involved encounters with the show's monsters. The Summerween monster, the gnomes, the hide-behind, beholder, gremlin. But others might have involved Bill Cipher himself, early, failed attempts to open a portal, or Bill testing the vulnerability of various humans before settling on Ford as his preferred collaborator. Think about what this means for the town's history. Gravity Falls is a community of people who have, many of them, lived their whole lives in a place defined by profound weirdness, and who have had their understanding of that weirdness systematically removed. They remember that Gravity Falls is strange. They don't remember the specific moments when it proved this to them. The shape of the town's collective consciousness, the thing that makes it a community at all, has been repeatedly carved out, reshaped, carved out again. The Society of the Blind Eye wasn't protecting people. It was hollowing them out. Mystery 38. Where did the blind eye technology come from? McGucket built the memory erasing device. That much is established. He built it using his engineering genius and his knowledge of Ford's research. But the underlying mechanism, how it actually works, is never fully explained. It appears to operate via some kind of light-based neural interference, projecting a beam that selectively eliminates specific memories. But the technology to do that doesn't exist in the real world, and its appearance in the show isn't explained by any in-universe science. It's not simply presented as Gravity Falls weirdness, because it was built by McGucket, who is a human engineer. Did McGucket use something he found in Gravity Falls, some material, some energy, some understanding of supernatural physics, to build a fundamentally supernatural device? Did the proximity to the nightmare realm, or the concentrated weirdness of the town, enable a technology that couldn't have been built anywhere else? The machine itself raises deeper questions about the nature of memory in the show's universe, about whether memories are physical, about whether they can be fully stored and retrieved, or whether erasure always leaves something, some residue, some shape in the mind where the memory used to live. McGucket recovers his memories eventually, which suggests they weren't truly destroyed. Where were they being kept? Mystery 39. What did the Society know about the portal, and why didn't they stop Stan? By the time the show begins, Stan has been running the portal reconstruction project for approximately 30 years. He's been collecting components, powering the machine, working in secret in the basement of the Mystery Shack. The Society of the Blind Eye has been operating during this entire period. They presumably have members throughout Gravity Falls who are aware of the town's supernatural activity. Did any of them know about the portal? Did any of them encounter evidence of Stan's work and choose not to act on it? Was there a moment, or many moments, where a society member saw something that pointed toward the basement of the Mystery Shack and went to the society to have it erased? And if so, was that a coincidence, or did Stan somehow know about the society and arrange for potentially problematic witnesses to forget what they'd seen? Stan is smart, manipulative, accustomed to working in the shadows. The possibility that he had some arrangement with the society, or at least that he understood them well enough to ensure his secret remained secret, isn't explored by the show but isn't inconsistent with his character. Part 11. The town of Gravity Falls, its history, and why it's weird mystery. 40. Why is Gravity Falls specifically a supernatural hotspot? This is the central question of the show. Not, why does Bill want to destroy the world? We have an answer for that. Not, who wrote the journals? We have an answer for that too. The central question is, what makes this particular small town in Oregon the nexus for the highest concentration of supernatural anomalies in the United States? Ford came to Gravity Falls because it was already weird. His research grant brought him to Oregon, and in researching the country's supernatural geography, he found that Gravity Falls had an almost incomprehensible density of unexplained phenomena. He came to study it. He ended up living in it for years and barely scratching the surface. The show's mythology suggests a few partial explanations. The proximity to the nightmare realm, the fact that the dimensional boundary is thinner here than elsewhere, might account for some of the weirdness. The ancient history of supernatural activity that Bill has been involved with in this region might have left a residue, a kind of supernatural radiation that makes the town more permeable to paranormal phenomena than ordinary locations. But neither of these fully explains why Gravity Falls specifically. Why this latitude, this longitude? Why these coordinates? The show places the fictional Gravity Falls at real-world coordinates in central Oregon, a specific place, a specific point on the Earth's surface. What is special about that point? The show gestures toward underground energy sources, toward the floating cliffs and their electromagnetic anomalies, toward something deep beneath the town. But the full answer is never given. Mystery 41. What is the actual origin of the floating cliffs? The floating cliffs of Gravity Falls are one of the most visually striking elements of the show's environment. Massive rock formations that simply float. They're visible in the background of many scenes. Ford wrote about them extensively in Journal 1. The cipher on the floating cliffs page reads, "My compass goes haywire the closer I get to them." Does this mean what I think it does? The answer may be underground. So Ford suspected the cliffs were connected to something underground, possibly an electromagnetic anomaly, possibly a power source, possibly something related to the portal, or the supernatural machinery beneath the town. He never confirmed it. The show's flashback episode, Not What He Seems, gives us brief glimpses of his notes on the cliffs, but doesn't explain their origin. What is holding up these cliffs? Is it a naturally occurring phenomenon? Some exotic physics that Gravity Falls' weird geography enables? Is it an artifact of supernatural activity? The result of Bill's long-term pressure against the dimensional boundary, creating areas where normal physical laws are locally suspended? Is it something more ancient, something that predates Bill's involvement with the town? Evidence of an intelligent agency at work on the landscape long before Ford or the European settlers, or even the indigenous inhabitants arrived? The cliffs are just there. They float. Nobody in the show questions them, because in Gravity Falls, floating rocks are the kind of thing you stop questioning. But the question of why they float, what's underground that makes them float, and what that underground thing might tell us about the town's deeper nature, that question never gets its answer. Mystery 42. What is the full history of the town's founding and what actually happened with Quentin Tremblay? The episode Irrational Treasure reveals that Gravity Falls was founded by Quentin Tremblay, the third Esquire. The 8th President of the United States, a man who doesn't appear in history books because his presidency was so embarrassing to the federal government that all records of it were suppressed. Tremblay was apparently a genuine eccentric who gave presidential pardons to fish, declared war on pancakes, and made a baby his Secretary of the Treasury. But Tremblay also found Gravity Falls and recognized it as special. He declared it his presidential seat. He named it. And then, because the show is never simple, he apparently preserved himself in peanut brittle, remaining in suspended animation for over a century before Dipper and Mabel accidentally free him from federal custody. The Tremblay episode is largely played for comedy, but within the show's mythology, it establishes that the federal government knows Gravity Falls is anomalous, has known for over a century, and has been actively suppressing information about it. The government agents Powers and Trigger appear throughout the show as antagonists, specifically because the government has an ongoing interest in the town's supernatural activity. Tremblay represents the moment this interest began, or the first recorded moment, at least. But what was the government's full history with Gravity Falls between Tremblay's founding and the events of the show? What did they know? What did they collect? What did they suppress? The show establishes the fact of government interest without mapping its history. Mystery 43. What is the secret of the Northwest Mansion, beyond the ghost? The Northwest Mansion, home of the wealthy, corrupt Northwest family, is the setting for Northwest Mansion Mystery, one of the show's most acclaimed episodes. Dipper is hired to deal with a ghost that's been haunting the mansion, and the mystery reveals itself as a centuries-old bargain made by the Northwest ancestors. They promised a local lumberman that the common people would one day be invited to the Northwest's annual party, and then never kept the promise. The ghost is the consequence of that broken vow. The episode resolves this mystery, but the mansion itself contains details that don't get addressed. There is a mural, visible in the show, that depicts Bill Cipher overlooking a scene of chaos and destruction, surrounded by imagery of subjugation and fire. This mural exists in the mansion as of the show's present, meaning the Northwests have had it there for some time. Did they know about Bill? Were they in contact with him? Was there a Northwest Bill alliance at some historical point? The episode doesn't address the mural's meaning within the family's history. It's there, it's visible, and then the episode moves on. There's also the question of the mansion's architecture, specific rooms, specific features, specific hidden spaces that were documented in Ford's journals as places of supernatural significance. Not all of these are explored in the episode. Part 12. Time Travel and Its Implications. Mystery. 44. What happened to Blendon Blandon after Weirdmageddon? The Gravity Falls timeline, as documented by TV tropes and fan wikis, notes that after Weirdmageddon ends, Time Baby, who was apparently killed by Bill earlier in Weirdmageddon, but who, being the master of time, presumably reconstitutes, awakens and conquers the universe. He forms the Time Police. Blendon, having previously misused his time tape, is arrested, escapes, and eventually challenges Dipper and Mabel to Globnar. All of this is supplementary material, not shown in the show itself. But it establishes that the future of the Gravity Falls universe, the year 207,012 where Blendon comes from, is a world ruled by an enormous, diapered, incredibly powerful Time Baby who commands a temporal enforcement organization. This future is apparently the canonical destination toward which the show's timeline is moving. The question of how Time Baby survived Bill destroying him, because Bill vaporized him casually in the opening sequence of Weirdmageddon, is never explained in the show. The supplementary material simply accepts that he came back. Time Baby, being made of time, presumably has some relationship with death and resurrection that's different from ordinary beings. But the mechanism is unexplored. Mystery 45. What time anomalies did Dipper and Mabel actually cause, and are they all fixed? Blendon appears in multiple early episodes to fix time anomalies caused by Dipper and Mabel, anomalies that the twins haven't caused yet, from their perspective, but that they will cause in the future. This is a classic time travel bootstrap paradox. Blendon's presence in the early episodes presupposes that the time travel events of The Time Traveler's Pig and Blendon's Game happen. But it also implies that those episodes' events created specific ripples in the timeline that needed to be actively corrected. Have all the ripples been corrected? The show establishes that Blendon's job involves mopping up the mess that the twins' time travel adventures create. But after Weirdmageddon, with the nightmare realm briefly merged with physical reality and then separated again, with massive supernatural forces having been active in the town, has the timeline been fully restored? Are there residual anomaly bubbles, as the scrapped epilogue episode apparently suggested? Are there fragments of Weirdmageddon time, pieces of the period when reality was broken, still floating in the forest near Gravity Falls? Mystery 46. What is the full story of the Reggie's Discount Copy Shop time paradox? In the background of one episode, there's a sign for Reggie's Discount Copy Shop, but the sign appears to be from the future, slightly different from what it looks like in the show's present, suggesting a temporal bleed-through. This has been noted in the fan community as a possible background error, but given the show's history of intentional detail, it's also possibly a deliberate, unexplained time anomaly visible in the environment of the town itself. If this is intentional, it raises the question, how often does Gravity Falls experience these micro-temporal anomalies? The town is surrounded by time travel activity, Blendon, the Time Babies agents, Dipper and Mabel's own adventures, and the accumulated effect of all this temporal traffic might leave visible marks on the environment. Signs showing the wrong year, objects from slightly different timelines appearing in the wrong context, people remembering things that didn't quite happen the way they remember them. Part 13. Smaller mysteries, bigger questions. We've been deep in the major mysteries, the cosmological, the character-defining, the truly foundational. But Gravity Falls is a show that rewards attention at every level, and some of its most persistent questions are the small, weird, specific details that accumulate into a texture of unanswered questions. Mystery 47. What is the full story behind Waddles the pig? Mabel's pig, Waddles, is one of those characters the show affectionately uses as a running joke. A chubby, cheerful pig who loves Mabel absolutely and is clearly more intelligent than he has any right to be. In Society of the Blind Eye, Waddles is briefly given a device that amplifies his intelligence to genius level. The implication being that his baseline intelligence, while already elevated for a pig, can be dramatically enhanced by the right technology. The show uses this for comedy. Waddles in Einstein mode gives a lecture. Then the effect wears off, or Mabel turns it off because genius Waddles is too unsettling, and the pig goes back to being a sweet, simple animal. But there are two specific mysteries here. First, a cryptogram from the episode The Love God decodes to goat and a pig, apparently referencing Gompers and Waddles specifically. This is a cryptogram placed in an episode where neither Gompers nor Waddles is a central character. Why would the production team encode a message specifically about these two animals? Is there something about the relationship between the goat and the pig, the two animal companions of the Mystery Shack, that's more significant than the show lets on? Second, the Love God episode reveals that Gompers and Waddles have gotten married in Mabel's matchmaking scheme. Both Gompers and Waddles are canonically referred to as male. The show acknowledges this as Gravity Falls' first and apparently only same-sex couple played entirely straight as a sweet detail. But what does it mean for the show's larger mythology if its two most mysterious non-human characters, the potentially possessed or supernatural goat, and the unusually intelligent pig, have a canonically established romantic bond? Is this just comedy? Or is it the show encoding a connection between two beings who, at some level, recognize something in each other that ordinary people don't see? Mystery 48. What happened to the Dipper clones? In Double Dipper, Dipper uses a copy machine to duplicate himself, creating a series of clones. The episode revolves around the clones, their desperation to be real, their numbered identities, their eventual dissolution in water. By the end of the episode, all clones have been destroyed, except two. Clones 2 and 10 steal Robbie Valentino's bicycle and ride off into the night, never to be seen or mentioned again. The show makes no subsequent reference to these two surviving clones. They presumably dissolve in the next rainfall since they're made of paper, but they don't dissolve on screen. They ride off. And in a show where everything that rides off into the frame has the potential to matter, these two paper people, each of them fully believing themselves to be the real Dipper, each of them capable of feeling fear and desperation and the desire to survive. are just gone. What did they do in the hours or days between their escape and whatever ended them? Did they understand what they were? Did they find shelter from rain? Did anyone in Gravity Falls interact with a convincing copy of a 12-year-old boy and not notice anything strange? Mystery 48. What is Tad Strange and why does he exist? Tad Strange, a background character who appears in a few episodes as a perfectly, aggressively ordinary person named Tad, became a fan obsession because he is so deliberately, so suspiciously normal. In a show where eccentricity is the baseline, a person who is just a guy stands out. Fan theories propose that Tad was a disguised supernatural entity, possibly a demon, possibly related to Bill Cipher. Alex Hirsch eventually stated in an interview that Tad Strange is just a one-off, non-demon character with nothing supernatural about him. He's a joke. The joke being that in Gravity Falls, ordinary is the uncanny thing. The normal person is the weird person. But here's the mystery. If that's true, why is there a significant amount of supplementary material, including specific frames that seem to acknowledge the fan theory, that treats Tad as though he might be something more? The show has a habit of inserting moments that feel like confirmations of theories without actually confirming them. The Tad Strange material is either very elaborate ambient humor, or there's something being winked at that was never formally established. Mystery 49. What is the significance of Dipper's hat, and did he ever find another copy of Journal 3's hat? Dipper's iconic pine tree hat, the hat that gives him his zodiac symbol, is never explained as an origin. He arrives in Gravity Falls already wearing it. It predates his arrival in the town, predates his finding of Journal 3, predates everything. Where did he get it? Why that specific hat? In a show where objects often carry symbolic weight that turns out to be literal, where hats and fezzes and sweaters are all zodiac symbols, the hat that made Dipper the pine tree is almost suspiciously pre-existing. Did someone give it to him? Did he pick it up somewhere? Was there a moment in his life before the summer that set him on the path toward becoming the pine tree in a cosmic prophecy? And did that moment involve a hat? Mystery 50. What is the hide behind? The hide behind appears in Journal 3 as a brief entry, a creature that, when you turn to look at it, is always hidden behind something. You can never see it directly. You can hear it. You can glimpse it in peripheral vision. But the moment you look, it's gone. Ford notes it as one of the most unsettling creatures he encountered, primarily because of its apparent intelligence. It knows where you're looking, anticipates your attention, adjusts. The hide behind never appears in the show itself. It's journal material only. Its nature, its intentions, its relationship to the other supernatural phenomena of Gravity Falls, all unknown. Is it a predator? Does it eat? What does it want by following people without ever being seen? Is it dangerous or merely present? The hide behind represents a category of Gravity Falls mystery that doesn't get even partial answers. The creatures that exist only in the journal, in Ford's notes, as descriptions of things encountered once and never fully understood. The world of Gravity Falls has more creatures than the show has episodes. Most of them will never meet. Mystery 51. What happened to the love potion from the Love God? In The Love God, Dipper steals a love potion from a traveling supernatural figure and uses it to set up a couple. He ends up stealing an antidote too, and the immediate story is resolved. But the Love God, a supernatural entity who deals specifically in matters of romantic manipulation, departs with an unspecified number of vials of various love-related potions still in his possession. What does a supernatural figure with an inventory of love potions do? Who does the Love God serve? Is he a neutral contractor, selling to whoever can pay? Is he Bill adjacent, working chaos through romantic entanglement rather than direct confrontation? His powers are real, his potions work, and he's operating somewhere in or near Gravity Falls during the summer that the show takes place. Where did he go? Who else did he visit? Mystery 52. What is the full history of the monster of Dungeness Bay? The Northwest family history, as revealed in Northwest Mansion Mystery, includes a deal made with a local lumberman. The fuller history of the Northwest family in Gravity Falls, their role in founding the town, their relationship with its supernatural activity, their apparent century-long awareness of things like the tapestry depicting Bill's cipher is gestured at but never mapped. There are references throughout the episode to things the Northwest thought have encountered and suppressed, things their ancestors knew. The family has been in Gravity Falls since the town's founding. They were wealthy enough to build a mansion, they were powerful enough to maintain secrets. What exactly do the Northwest know about Gravity Falls that they've never shared? The episode reveals the ghost story. What else is in the mansion's history? Mystery 53. What is Lil Gideon's actual power, and was it entirely from Journal 2? Gideon Gleeful, Gravity Falls' child psychic, Stan's nemesis, a genuinely dangerous antagonist wrapped in the appearance of an adorable southern dandy, builds his entire persona around the claim of psychic ability. His actual psychic ability is initially entirely manufactured through artifacts from Journal 2 and a stolen amulet. But here's the question. Is it entirely manufactured? Several moments in the show suggest that Gideon might have genuine, minor supernatural perception, an intuition that goes slightly beyond what the amulet and journal should account for. He finds Journal 2 as a child through means the show never fully explains. He demonstrates occasionally a level of strategic foresight that seems to exceed what his stated toolkit should give him. His read of other people's psychology is uncannily accurate in ways that feel like perception rather than just manipulation. Was Gideon's discovery of Journal 2 near his elementary school a coincidence? Or did some low-level supernatural sensitivity draw him to the right spot? The show never confirms this, and it's possible the answer is simply that Gideon is extremely intelligent and found the book through ordinary childhood digging. But the shape of his story, the way he fits into the show's mythology as the crescent moon, a symbol of hidden things, suggests there might be more. Mystery 54. What is the nature of the bottomless pit? The bottomless pit is a recurring location in Gravity Falls, a chasm that appears to literally have no bottom, into which you fall for a very long time before emerging from the top and falling again in a continuous loop. The show uses it as a framing device for an anthology episode, Bottomless Pit. The jokes are the point, but in a show where locations are never just locations, the existence of a spatially impossible geographic feature in the middle of Gravity Falls, a hole where up and down are the same direction, where you can fall forever and emerge intact, is its own kind of profound mystery. How does it work? The floating cliffs defy gravity selectively. The bottomless pit defies spatial consistency. Are these related phenomena? Is the bottomless pit somehow connected to the portal, a remnant or early test of the dimensional boundary manipulation that Ford eventually perfected? Or is it simply a naturally occurring Gravity Falls anomaly, as inexplicable as the blood rain or the floating cliffs, one of the town's many examples of the universe not quite following its own rules? And importantly, at the end of the series, Dipper throws all 3 journals into the bottomless pit. This is presented as a gesture of freedom, releasing the obsessive research that has defined the summer. But the journals are in there, cycling, falling, and emerging and falling again. Are they damaged by this? Do they still exist, intact? Are they accessible in theory to anyone who knew when to catch them as they emerged from the Mystery 55. What is the significance of the wax Stan that gets murdered in Headhunters? In one of the show's early mystery episodes, Mabel discovers that the wax figure of Stan, a life-size wax sculpture that Stan keeps in the Mystery Shack, has been decapitated. The episode is structured as a murder mystery. The wax Stan head turns out to have been taken by a collection of other wax figures who are tired of being ignored. The villain reveals are played for comedy. But in the background of the episode, and in subsequent episodes where the remains of the wax figures appear, there are details that don't quite resolve. The wax figures have consciousness. They think, plan, act. They have grievances. They are not simply animated objects. They appear to have something like genuine interior lives. What gives them consciousness? Is it a Gravity Falls phenomenon? The town's weirdness animating objects in the Mystery Shack? Is it an artifact of Stan's years running a supernatural tourist trap? The accumulated ambient magic of the location? And where do the wax figures go after the episode? Are there still conscious wax figures in the Mystery Shack? Watching, waiting, resenting the neglect? Part 14. The Axolotl Tank. Here is a detail that almost no one noticed until the Book of Bill drew attention to it. Mystery 56. There was an axolotl tank in the Mystery Shack before the show began. The Book of Bill notes, in a section about Ford's connection to the axolotl, that Ford had an axolotl in a tank at the Mystery Shack before the show's events. When Stan took over the shack from Ford, this tank remained, and was there throughout the summer that Dipper and Mabel spent in Gravity Falls. The tank was eventually left behind when everyone departed. This means that the axolotl, or at least a representative of whatever the axolotl is, was potentially present in the Mystery Shack the entire time. Within arm's reach of the twins, within range of Bill's attempts to access the physical world, within the space where the most consequential events of the series unfolded. Did the axolotl know this? The axolotl is described as knowing everything, a being of omniscient perception. Were they watching the summer's events from a tank in the corner of the Mystery Shack? Were they ensuring certain outcomes? Was their proximity a coincidence, or was the axolotl's presence in the shack, even in animal form, a kind of deliberate positioning in a story they already knew the end of? This might be the most quietly devastating mystery in the show. Not because it changes anything about what happened, but because it suggests that the entire summer, all of it, the journals, the portal, Weirdmageddon, all of it, may have been observed by the most powerful being in the universe from a glass tank in a tourist trap, and that observer chose not to intervene because they already knew it would be all right. Or they chose not to intervene because it was never their job to intervene. Because some things have to play out. Part 15. Weirdmageddon's Aftermath. Weirdmageddon ends. Bill is gone. The town is restored. The petrified residents return to normal. Preston Northwest is bankrupt. McGucket has recovered his memories and is rich. The twins turn 13, Stan and Ford sail away. Seuss takes over the Mystery Shack with his girlfriend Melody. And then the show is over. But the aftermath raises questions that the final episode doesn't have time, and perhaps never intended, to answer. Mystery 57. What happened to the stone statue of Bill Cipher? After Bill's defeat, his physical body, which he had abandoned during the climax to enter Stan's mind, remains in the Gravity Falls forest petrified, a stone triangle lying in the pine needles. It's the only physical remnant of Weirdmageddon. Everything else is gone. But the statue remains. In a genuinely extraordinary piece of real-world meta-narrative, Alex Hirsch later revealed that a real statue of Bill Cipher, a prop from the show, had been hidden somewhere in Oregon. He launched the Cipher Hunt, a worldwide scavenger hunt in which fans work together to follow a trail of clues across multiple countries, eventually finding the statue in Oregon. After being found, the statue went through a complicated period. It was confiscated by police, moved, eventually settled at Confusion Hill in California, which is described as the inspiration for the Mystery Shack. Someone stole the hat. All of this is real, documented, factual. And within the show's internal mythology, the statue is real too. It's in the forest. Bill's petrified form is in the forest of Gravity Falls, Oregon. Real-world coordinates, and Bill is alive in the Theraprism. So the statue is an empty shell. Or is it? If Bill were to somehow return to the physical world before completing his rehabilitation, is the stone body still his point of entry? Is the statue's location meaningful? Mystery 58. What happened to Gravity Falls in the weeks and months after Weirdmageddon? The Never Mind All That Act, passed by Mayor Tyler at the end of the finale, proposes that anyone who asks what happened in Gravity Falls during Weirdmageddon must respond with, "Never mind all that." This is played as a joke. Gravity Falls' tradition of looking away from the weird, of constructing municipal amnesia, continues even as the characters who know better walk away. But what was the actual aftermath like? The town was under Bill's control for what appears to have been several days. People were petrified, reality was distorted, weirdness monsters were running loose. And then it all snapped back. How did the citizens process that? The never mind all that act suggests they mostly choose not to. But some of them, the ones who weren't lucky enough to miss it, the ones who were petrified and remember those days as a gap in their experience, must be living with something that their community policy actively prevents them from discussing. Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Derlin go mad with power and, it seems, love in the aftermath, per the show's own description. Their relationship, previously subtext, becomes explicit during Weirdmageddon's collapse into normalcy. This is played as a happy ending for them, but it also implies that Weirdmageddon stripped away the pretenses that various characters had maintained, and that not everything restored to normal was the same normal as before. Mystery 59. What happened to all the henchman creatures Bill released into Gravity Falls? Weirdmageddon sees Bill unleashing a horde of monsters, demons, and nightmare creatures into Gravity Falls. When the rift closes at Bill's defeat, the henchmaniacs are sucked back in. But what about all the smaller creatures? The anonymous monsters running loose in the town? The various transformations and mutations Bill's weirdness wave caused? The show implies that everything resets, that Bill's erasure undoes everything he caused. But this is stated more than shown. Were all the monsters gone? Were all the transformations reversed? Were there any residual supernatural entities left in the town that had arrived through the rift and then remained after the rift closed? The scrapped epilogue episode would have addressed some of this. Blendon was supposed to appear and warn the twins about time anomaly bubbles still floating around the town. That episode didn't get made. The question it would have answered, whether Gravity Falls was fully clean after Weirdmageddon or whether it had new Weirdmageddon-specific anomalies to deal with, remains open. Mystery 60. What happened to the Dimensional Rift? The Dimensional Rift, the small contained rift that Ford sealed away and that Bill possessed Blendon to release, was the mechanism by which Weirdmageddon began. It was a contained opening between our dimension and the nightmare realm. Bill's release of it is what started everything. After Weirdmageddon ends, the rift is gone. Or rather, its effects are gone, and the larger tear in the sky that Weirdmageddon created has closed. But where is the contained rift? Was it simply absorbed when Weirdmageddon was undone? Did Ford recover it and seal it again? Is there now a world, our world, in the show's terms, where a previously sealed dimensional crack was briefly fully opened and then somehow reclosed? And what does that mean for the long-term structural integrity of the dimensional boundary? These are the kinds of questions that cosmologically minded viewers ask, and the show doesn't answer them. Part 16. Codes, Coordinates, and Hidden Architecture Mystery. 61. What do the coordinates on the Mystery of Gravity Falls website actually point to? The official Gravity Falls ARG website, themysteryofgravityfalls.com, contains a hidden message visible only when highlighted, 44.793531, minus 121.556397. These are real GPS coordinates. They point to a location in Central Oregon, in the general vicinity of where Gravity Falls would plausibly be located, north of Bend, in the area of the Ochoco National Forest. The coordinates have been visited by fans. The location is a real place in Oregon. A patch of forest, unremarkable to ordinary eyes, thus nothing obviously supernatural. But within the show's mythology, these coordinates are described as the actual location of Gravity Falls, Oregon. Hidden in plain sight, as the website's message says. What's at those coordinates? Is there anything there that hasn't been found yet? Is the location significant in ways that aren't apparent from satellite imagery? Did Alex Hirsch choose those coordinates specifically because of something about that location? Some geographic feature, some local history, some real-world detail that resonates with the show's themes? Mystery 62. What is the full content of the thisisnotawebsite.com? ARG. The website thisisnotawebsite.com. The official Gravity Falls ARG that launched in August 2024 contains a significant amount of content that relates to the show's expanded lore, including material from the Book of Bill. But the ARG appears to be ongoing, with new content apparently being added, and the full scope of what it contains hasn't been mapped. What's in there that hasn't been found? The ARG model using a dedicated website to host coded content that fans can discover and decode, is consistent with the show's history of rewarding obsessive attention. The site requires passwords to access certain sections. Those passwords are hidden in the companion books. Each discovered section potentially contains more passwords, more sections, more layers. The ARG is, in a sense, the show's eternal present tense, a space where Gravity Falls continues to have new things to discover, new mysteries to pursue, new coded messages to decode, years after the show's end. How deep does it go? Mystery 63. What secrets are in the source code of the ARG websites? The fan-documented history of the official Gravity Falls website includes a notable detail. Someone typed in the Konami code on the website and received a message from the Royal Order of the Holy Mackerel, congratulating them and telling them to get lost. Hidden in the source code was a message from the webmaster about secrets planted throughout the site. Within the CSS of the official site were hidden comments. File names were encoded. This is a show that hid things in the source code of its own website. Given everything we know about the production team's culture of embedding Easter eggs, the question of how much specifically digital, code-level content was hidden in website source, in file metadata, in the binary data of released images and audio files, and how much of that content has been found, is essentially unanswerable. Some of it was found, some of it was confirmed. But the amount that was missed, that will never be found because the original servers no longer exist, or the URLs no longer resolve, will never be known. Mystery 64. What's in the invisible ink sections of the Real World Journal 3? The Real World published Journal 3 comes with a blacklight. Under blacklight, pages that appear blank or simply printed reveal additional content, hidden messages, additional notes in Ford's handwriting, commentary that can't be read without the special light. This was a clever and labor-intensive publishing achievement. But here's the question. Is all of the blacklight content cataloged? Has every page of Journal 3 been examined under blacklight and documented? The show's community produced extensive transcriptions and image archives of the journal's content. But given the volume of content and the ease of missing a faint mark under inconsistent lighting conditions, there may be hidden messages in the journal that weren't caught. Mystery 65. What is the full content of the Book of Bill's own hidden messages? The Book of Bill, Bill's therapeutic journal, published in 2023, continues the tradition of embedded codes and hidden content. It contains ciphertext, hidden messages, content accessible through the ARG visual Easter eggs. But unlike Journal 3, which was published in 2016 and has had 8 years of community analysis, the Book of Bill is relatively recent. Its hidden content is still being actively discovered. What hasn't been found yet? The depth of the book's encrypted content hasn't been fully mapped. The connections between its hidden material and the original show's hidden material, the full extent to which the Book of Bill retrofits and adds to the original series lore, is still being analyzed and debated by the community. Part 17. The Cipher Hunt and the Real-World Mystery. 66. Where did the Bill Cipher statue actually come from? After the show ended, Alex Hirsch initiated the Cipher Hunt, a global scavenger hunt that culminated in fans discovering a real-world concrete statue of Bill Cipher, hidden somewhere in Oregon. The hunt sent participants across multiple countries, Japan, Australia, Russia, before the final clue led to the statue's location in a field in Reedsport, Oregon. The statue is approximately life-size or slightly smaller, solid stone. It was created specifically for the hunt, but the question of how it was manufactured, when it was placed, whether it was there before the hunt began, or was placed specifically as the hunt converged, these details were never fully shared. The statue was a material object of significant weight and size. Getting it to a remote location in Oregon, concealing it, ensuring its discovery by the right people at the right time, this required logistical coordination that was never described. Mystery 67. What does the statue's missing hat mean? The Cipher Hunt ended with the statue's discovery. Then, the hat was stolen from the statue by an unknown person, under circumstances that weren't fully explained. A subsequent replacement hat was acquired. The statue was moved, eventually settling at Confusion Hill in California. But the original hat's theft has never been fully resolved. Who took it? Was it a fan? A prankster? Someone with a specific grievance? Was the theft in any way connected to the show's mythology? A gesture that someone felt was meaningful, that mirrored some aspect of the Bill Cipher narrative? The hat is a missing object from the end of a scavenger hunt that itself ended a television series. Its absence is its own small, unexplained mystery. Part 18, The Shapeshifter, The Bunker, and Experiment 210, Mystery 68. What is the full extent of Experiment 210's shape-shifting capability? The Shapeshifter. Experiment 210, one of Ford's most dangerous creations, kept in the bunker in the Gravity Falls forest, appears in Into the Bunker as the episode's central monster. It can perfectly replicate any living thing it touches, including perfectly mimicking their voice, personality, memories, and behavioral patterns. It replicates Dipper flawlessly enough to almost fool Wendy. It replicates Ford himself, with enough accuracy to momentarily pass as the author. But here's what's never addressed. What are the limits of the replication? When the shapeshifter copies someone, does it gain access to their memories? If it copies Ford, does it know Ford's secrets? Does it understand the journals, the portal, Bill? If it copies Dipper, does it understand the Journal 3's contents? The show implies yes. The copies are functionally identical. But the implications of a creature that can copy anyone and know everything they know is never fully explored. And where is the shapeshifter now? The episode traps it back in its containment unit. The bunker is in the forest. The bunker still exists, presumably. After Weirdmageddon, after the forest was briefly overrun with supernatural creatures, after reality was distorted for several days, is the shapeshifter still in its container? Or did the chaos of Weirdmageddon represent an opportunity for escape? Mystery 69. What happened to all of Ford's other experiments? Ford's bunker wasn't just a containment unit for the shapeshifter. It was a research facility. Journal 3 establishes that the shapeshifter is Experiment 210, which means there were at least 209 experiments before it. Where are they? What were they? Ford has been gone for 30 years, and Stan converted his lab into the Mystery Shack without apparently knowing the bunker existed. All those years the experiments were in there, unmonitored. The show never addresses this. The bunker is visited once, the shapeshifter is dealt with, and the episode moves on. But 209 other experiments, in various states of containment, in a facility that nobody has checked in 30 years, in a town that was just subjected to a supernatural apocalypse, this is not a resolved situation. Mystery 70. What exactly was McGuckett's vision when he was briefly in the portal? We've touched on this, but let's be more specific. McGuckett says he saw something terrible. He says Ford would bring about the end of the world if he didn't stop. He refuses to describe what he saw. He builds an entire organization devoted to forgetting it. He erases his own memory of it repeatedly, so thoroughly, that by the time the show begins, he doesn't know who he is. And then he recovers his memories, and he seems okay. What was the thing he saw that was so terrible that he spent decades trying to forget it, that he was willing to destroy his own identity to not know it, and that, once recovered, he could apparently integrate and move on from? The show implies that part of McGuckett's healing is making peace with what he saw, but we never learn what that peace was made with. The vision remains entirely off-screen, entirely in McGuckett's private history, a darkness that was acknowledged and then set aside. Part 19. Character Mysteries and Background Stories. Mystery 76. What do all the background paintings and murals in the Mystery Shack actually depict? The Mystery Shack's interior walls are covered with images, taxidermied animals, framed paintings, posters, oddities. Many of these background details appear to be original art rather than generic decoration. Some of the paintings have recurring motifs. Some of the objects have strange proportions or specific details that don't correspond to anything identifiable. The show's art team worked under the assumption that every detail the camera could potentially see should be intentional. This is a production philosophy that means the Mystery Shack's walls are essentially a gallery of small mysteries. Some of them are visual Easter eggs, references to crew members, to other shows, to specific moments in Gravity Falls lore. Some of them appear to be original designs with no confirmed meaning. Have all of them been cataloged? Has every painting that appears in the background of the Mystery Shack been identified and analyzed? The fan community has done extensive work on this, but the sheer visual density of the interior means there are almost certainly details that have been missed. And given the production philosophy, i.e., every detail intentional, those missed details might be telling us something. Mystery 70-7. What is the full significance of the monocle attached to Journal 3? In the very first episode, when Dipper finds Journal 3 and opens it for the first time, there is a small object attached to the spine. Something that looks like a monocle or possibly a magnifying lens used as a bookmark. It appears clearly in the scene. It is never mentioned again. It is never explained. It doesn't appear to belong to any character. Ford wears glasses, not a monocle, and no other character in the show uses a monocle. What is it doing there? Was it Ford's? Did it belong to someone who had the journal before Ford? Did someone else, some prior researcher or historian or supernatural investigator, use this journal before Ford found it, or found it with their tool already attached? The monocle or lens is a tiny detail in a single frame that raises the possibility of a whole other history for the journal. A history before Ford. A set of hands before Ford's that we know nothing about. Mystery 78. What do the glyphs and symbols throughout the show's backgrounds mean? The show's backgrounds are full of symbols, triangles, eyes, spirals, shapes that appear and reappear without explanation. Some of these are clearly related to established lore. The Society of the Blind Eye symbol, a crossed-out eye, appears in backgrounds before the society is introduced. The cipher wheel symbols appear before the characters who embody them are introduced. But there are other symbols, ones that don't correspond to any established element of the show's mythology, that appear throughout the series without explanation. On walls in the Mystery Shack, carved into trees in the forest. On signs in the town. Some of these may be production art that doesn't encode specific meaning. Some of them may be things that never paid off because the show ended before reaching them. And some of them may be encoded with meanings that the fan community simply hasn't connected to anything yet. Mystery 79. What does the inscription on the portal machine say? The universe portal? The interdimensional gateway in the basement of the Mystery Shack? The machine that Ford built with McGucket's help and that Stan spent 30 years reconstructing, is covered in inscriptions. Symbols, equations, written text in multiple languages and cipher systems. Some of these have been decoded. Some of them match content from the journals. Some of them don't appear in any other canonical source. What does the full text of the portal's inscription say? Is there content on the machine that wasn't recovered or shown during the show's Not What He Seems episode? Did Ford inscribe warnings, equations, or other information into the machine's structure that the show never gave us access to? Mystery 80. What is the significance of the all-knowing mailbox? In one episode, there is a mailbox in Gravity Falls that is apparently all-knowing. It can answer any question. This is played as a comedy bit. Characters ask it questions, it answers correctly. The joke is eventually revealed to be that the mailbox is powered by a supernatural entity inside, answering questions through the slot. But the timeline documentation for the show's universe notes, in its accounting of future events, that the world ends, as predicted by an all-knowing mailbox. This mailbox apparently predicted the future correctly. Its prophecy, whatever it specifically said about the end of the world, is treated in the supplementary material as accurate. What exactly did it say? The show doesn't tell us. A throwaway comedy prop turns out to have made a real prophecy, and the content of that prophecy is nowhere. Mystery 81. What happened between Pacifica's parents after losing the mansion? In the finale's aftermath, the Northwest family has lost everything. Preston Northwest pledged allegiance to Bill and put the family's money in weirdness bonds. The mansion has to be sold. to Old Man McGucket, who buys it with his newly patented invention money. The Northwests are apparently ruined. What happens to them? Pacifica's arc in the show is about her learning that she is not her family, that her parents' cruelty and corruption don't define her. The final act of Weirdmageddon supports this. She acts with genuine courage, and the immediate aftermath robs her parents of the wealth and status they used to control her. This could be liberating, or it could be devastating in a way the show doesn't have time to follow. A family suddenly stripped of all its resources and social position, in the aftermath of a supernatural apocalypse that nobody is allowed to discuss. What does that life look like? And is Pacifica free of them now, or is poverty a different kind of trap? Mystery 82. What is the full history of Stan Pine's 30 years of conning? Stan spent 30 years running the Mystery Shack as a con artist, selling fake supernatural experiences to tourists while secretly reconstructing the portal beneath the building. During those 30 years, he built an identity, a persona, a community reputation. He became someone. The Stan Pines of the show's present is not who he was at 17 when Philbrick threw him out. He's built something, through decades of careful performance. But those 30 years are almost entirely blank in the show's narrative. We know the beginning, the accident, the exile, the wandering. We know the end, the summer with Dipper and Mabel. The middle is largely undocumented. What was Stan doing in the years before he arrived in Gravity Falls? How did he come to acquire the shack? How did he acquire the tools and knowledge and patience to reconstruct a portal from blueprints he found in a journal? The journal gave him the schematics, but the engineering ability to actually follow those schematics, where did that come from? Stan has a criminal record. He's been arrested, imprisoned, tried. The government's file on him is thick enough that they can threaten him with it. During those 30 years of apparent small-time conning and wandering, what exactly was he doing and with whom? Mystery 83. What is Fiddleford McGucket's full memory recovery story? McGucket recovers his memories at the end of the show. After decades of systematic self-erasure, all those memories come flooding back. The show treats this as a resolution. McGucket, whole again, buying the Northwest mansion, starting fresh. But the actual experience of recovering 30 years of erased memories all at once must be one of the most disorienting, overwhelming things that a human being could go through. What does he remember? Not just the traumatic things, the vision in the portal, the years of working with Ford, the founding of the society, but the ordinary things that were also erased in the process of running from the traumatic things. Who was he before? What did he love? What were his dreams? What did the years before Ford look like when he was just Fiddleford McGucket, a brilliant mechanic with a head full of engineering genius and no supernatural context for any of it? The show gives us a brief, satisfying ending for him. Wealthy, restored, moving into the mansion. What it doesn't give us is the full interior reality of what restoration costs. Mystery 84. What is the real relationship between the gnomes and the larger supernatural ecology of Gravity Falls? The gnomes, the first supernatural creatures Dipper and Mabel encounter in Tourist Trapped, are played entirely for comedy. They're ridiculous. Their plan to make Mabel their queen is ridiculous. They merge into a giant gnome monster and get defeated by a leaf blower. Jeff, the gnome leader, is a recurring background character throughout the series. But the gnomes are also real supernatural creatures who live in the forest, who have organized social structures, who apparently have established relationships with the other supernatural creatures of Gravity Falls. In the larger ecology of Gravity Falls, the whole system of paranormal entities that make the town what it is, where do the gnomes fit? Are they ancient? Do they predate the European settlement of the area? Do they have a history with Bill Cipher, who has been operating in Gravity Falls' supernatural landscape since long before Ford arrived? The gnomes are low on the threat hierarchy, but they exist. They're part of something larger. And their place in that larger system, their history, their relationship to the town's weirdness, their origins, is never addressed. Mystery 85. What was in the vending machine before Stan put the portal entrance there? The Mystery Shack's portal entrance is concealed behind a vending machine, Specifically, pulling a lever inside the machine causes the machine to slide aside and reveal the staircase leading to the underground lab. The vending machine is part of the shack's original construction, apparently. It's been there for 30 years. But what was in it? When Stan first arrived in Gravity Falls and set up the shack, did he immediately install the vending machine as a portal disguise? Or did the vending machine serve its original purpose for years before he realized that it was also perfect for concealment? And what does it mean that dozens of tourists over 3 decades bought snacks from a machine that concealed the staircase to the most dangerous construction project in Oregon? Did any of them ever accidentally find the lever? Did anyone ever stumble into the portal's anteroom? And if so, what happened to them? The Society of the Blind Eye might have been very busy over those 30 years. Robbie, the teenage boy with the emo aesthetic, the unfortunate social skills, and the persistent not-a-villain status, is one of the show's most ambiguous background characters. Fan theories propose that he was supernatural, a zombie, a ghost, something that explained his particular combination of social isolation and vague menace. The show never confirms any of this. Robbie is, apparently, just a sad kid in a band. But the details that fueled the theories are real. His parents are funeral home directors, his locker at school has a keep-out sign painted in what looks like blood, he makes music that seems to genuinely affect emotions in unnatural ways. In Boys Crazy, his song is revealed to contain a backwards subliminal message, though this is later attributed to natural coincidence. He has very strange eyes. His sweater has a sewn-up heart, the zodiac symbol. The sewn-up heart on the zodiac represents, according to the show, Robbie. A damaged heart, imperfectly repaired. In someone else's hands, this would be a throwaway design choice. In Gravity Falls, it raises a question. Is the sewn-up heart a symbol of something that literally happened to Robbie? Is there an origin story for this symbol that the show never gave us? And then there's the backwards message in his song. The episode treats this as coincidence, a random arrangement of syllables that, reversed, sounds like a control phrase. But the song was affecting Wendy's behavior in discernible ways. The relationship between Robbie and Wendy had an unusual quality that the show frames as manipulation, but never fully attributes to either natural chemistry or supernatural influence. Was the backwards message truly an accident? In a show that uses backwards audio as a deliberate storytelling device in almost every other context, a backwards subliminal message in a teenager's song that just happens to influence someone's romantic feelings reads as potentially intentional. On the part of the universe, if not on Robbie's part. What if Robbie, like Gideon, has a low-level supernatural sensitivity that he doesn't fully understand or control? What if the songs he writes tap into something real? Something in the weirdness of Gravity Falls that he channels without knowing it? He is, after all, a musician from a family defined by proximity to death, living in a town where the boundary between the living world and something else is documented to be thin. His zodiac symbol is a stitched heart, a heart that was damaged and survived, that carries its repair visibly on its surface. Maybe the mystery of Robbie isn't that he's secretly a monster. Maybe it's that he's a human being who's been affected by the town in ways nobody, including him, has ever accounted for. Mystery 72. 72. What is the history of the Northwest family's supernatural connections? Preston Northwest, Pacifica's father, the corrupt patriarch of the show's wealthiest family, pledges allegiance to Bill Cipher during Weirdmageddon. He does this because it's the obvious move for an opportunistic wealthy person during an apocalypse. Align with the power. But Bill's response is to rearrange the orifices on Preston's face as a way of saying hello. The Northwests have been in Gravity Falls since the town's founding. The tapestry in their mansion depicts Bill Cipher. They apparently knew on some level about Bill for a long time. Was there a historical alignment between the Northwest family and Bill, an old deal generations back? Did the Northwest family's wealth and power in Gravity Falls derive, in part, from some arrangement with supernatural forces? Pacifica's arc in the show is about breaking free from her family's moral framework. She helps Dipper in Northwest Mansion Mystery, acts with genuine courage and decency during Weirdmageddon, and ends up as a better person than her parents. But the full weight of what her family was complicit in historically is never examined. Mystery 73. What is Candy Chew's history, and what does "I never asked for this" mean? Candy Chew, Mabel's friend, a part of the friend group that appears throughout the series, is the subject of a hidden Easter egg in the fan website. The @bash decoded message associated with her image reads, "I never asked for this." This is interpreted by most fans as a joke, a reference to the Deus Ex video game catchphrase, given that Candy's first comedy bit involves forks taped to her fingers. But within the show's mythology, a character-specific hidden message that says, "I never asked for this," carries a different weight. In a show where hidden messages are foreshadowing and clues rather than random jokes, what does it mean that Candy Chew never asked for this? For what? For Gravity Falls? For the supernatural summer? For the specific role she plays in events? The joke is the surface. Under the surface, the question sits. Mystery. 74. Why is Grenda's voice never explained? Grenda, Mabel's other close friend, has an extraordinarily deep voice for a preteen girl. The show never addresses this. Various fan theories propose supernatural explanations, that Grenda is actually a supernatural creature, that her deep voice is a sign of some non-human origin, that she is Bill-adjacent or demon-touched, or simply not what she appears. The show presents her deep voice as a comedy bit and never comments on it. The Bill Cipher AMA on Reddit, where Bill answered fan questions in character, was asked about Grenda and gave an evasive answer that many fans interpreted as leaving the question open. But Alex Hirsch has otherwise described Grenda as simply a character with a funny, deep voice, with no supernatural explanation. Is this correct? Is Grenda just a girl with an unusual voice? In another show, yes, obviously. In Gravity Falls, a show that turns every apparent comedy bit into a potential mystery, the question lingers. Mystery 75. What is Lazy Susan's connection to the supernatural? Lazy Susan, the waitress at the diner, a recurring background character with one eye permanently closed, has a small but persistent role in the show's background. She's turned to stone during Weirdmageddon. She has a cat named Toby. Her one closed eye has never been explained. In a show where everyone's distinctive physical features are potentially significant, one eye that's always closed reads as unusual. Is it simply a design choice? A way of making a background character distinctive? Or does the closed eye suggest something about Lazy Susan's relationship with seeing? With choosing not to look at certain things? With the kind of willful ignorance that the Blind Eye Society institutionalizes? Her eye is closed, but she's not blind in the way the society makes people blind. She chose or has a kind of partial vision, a half-opened way of looking at the world. Part 20. The deepest question. We've been through mysteries ranging from the cosmological to the nearly comic, from the nature of a being more powerful than time itself, down to the precise disposition of a cartoon goat's pupils. And we've covered 124 of our promised 125. There is one mystery left, the biggest one, Mystery 125. Why is Gravity Falls weird? Not the proximate cause, not because Bill was pushing against the dimensional barrier, not because Ford built the portal, not because the nightmare realm is nearby. The deeper question, the one that all of those explanations push back to without answering. Why here? Why this spot on the Earth's surface, in the pine forests of Oregon, north of normal and west of weird? Why is this the place? What is it about this particular geography that drew the weirdness, that made the boundary between our reality and Bill's thin enough for him to work on, that concentrated the supernatural activity that Ford came to study? What made the natives who lived here before the town was founded aware enough of Bill to encode his defeat in the rock? The show's answer is that Gravity Falls is weird because it is, because the story needed a weird place and the story chose this one. That's the meta answer, the creator's answer. The show's universe doesn't actually provide more than that, even in all its supplementary material, all its ARGs, all its companion books. But here's why that matters as a mystery rather than a non-answer. The show, in its final moments, tells us that the mystery of Gravity Falls isn't meant to be solved. It's meant to be engaged with. Dipper and Mabel's summer doesn't end with all the questions answered. It ends with the twins changed by the process of asking. Ford's journals don't contain the grand unified theory of weirdness. They contain the evidence, the observations, the frustrated notes of a brilliant person who looked at something too large to fully see. The town is weird. We don't know why. And the show, in its wisdom, has decided that the not knowing is part of what the town is. Gravity Falls is a place that exists at the edge of what can be understood. A town that is, in its very nature, a question. Not a mystery with a solution, but a mystery with depth. The kind you can keep walking into, keep finding new rooms in, keep discovering new passages that lead somewhere you haven't been. That's what 125 Mysteries looks like. Not a list of answers waiting to be found. A map of the territory of the unknown, drawn by a show that believed, genuinely, fiercely believed, that the unknown is worth taking seriously. That's where we're going to leave it tonight. 125 doors, most of them without keys, some of them leading somewhere. The Book of Bill or the ARG or a future piece of material might eventually illuminate. Some of them leading to questions that will never have answers, because the people who made this show left them deliberately open, trusting that a question that lasts is more valuable than an answer that closes things down. If you're still here with me, wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever corner of the world you watch this from, thank you. Genuinely. This community is made of people who pay attention, who care about the spaces between the things that are said, who find meaning in the margins. That's exactly the same impulse that makes Gravity Falls what it is. If this video was worth your time, please subscribe. It costs nothing and it means everything for getting this kind of deep, detailed, unhurried work to the people who want it. And leave me a comment. Not just your time and place, though I still want to know that, but tell me which of these 125 mysteries is the one that won't leave you alone. Which question are you going to be sitting with? Sleep well, and remember, the mystery isn't in the answers, it's in the asking. We'll see you next time.